Gonzaga jumped up to number 7 in the AP poll, while the Lady Zags are finally ranked at number 23 after a huge win over Stanford. We got all that and a preview of tonight's game against Ark-Pine Bluff on deck for today's Locked On Zags podcast.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. We got a lot to discuss today. We're going to discuss Gonzaga sneaking up to number 7 in the AP poll. And then the women's team sneaking in finally, number 23. They've probably deserved to be ranked for a while. That narrow loss to Washington State early in the season kept them from jumping into the rankings, but then a monster win over Stanford. We got all that covered to close out the show. But first, we're going to lead things off talking about Ark-Pine Bluff, Gonzaga's opponent. On Tuesday evening, the Zags are playing the Golden Lions December 5th. Again, many of you listening here on Tuesday before the game starts. The game will tip off at 6 p.m. Pacific time, as we did last week with Cal State Bakersfield. Same situation, 6 p.m. The game is on ESPN Plus for those of you out of market. For those in market in Spokane, it'll be on KHQ. For those of you in that middle, not in, but not out of market area, namely Portland and Seattle area, the game, I believe, is going to be on Root Sports. If you do not have Root Sports, it is tough to watch because ESPN will black the game out. You can see if there's KHQ streams. Fubo TV has Root Sports, but yeah, it is. These kind of games can be a little bit tricky with the Gonzaga's reliance on Root Sports, and Root being a somewhat difficult channel to get. Again, if you join our Discord channel, which there is a link in your show notes, before every game, we make sure everybody has figured out a way to watch this game, kind of helping each other out before the game gets started. So definitely join there, and you can get some help trying to figure out how to watch this game. Let's talk a little bit about the Golden Lions here of Ark-Pine Bluff. They are the first of 3 SWAC opponents that Gonzaga will face this year. They also will play Mississippi Valley State on the 11th, so about a week from now. Then they will play Jackson State on the 20th, their final game before the Christmas break. And then, of course, that San Diego State game, and then getting into conference play. Some people have kind of wondered, well, Gonzaga plays a lot of teams from this conference. They play Texas Southern a lot. They've played Alcorn State in recent years. Of course, 3 games from this same conference here this season. These are HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. They're schools that are underfunded, unfortunately, and rely on these non-conference games in order to pay for their athletic budget in some ways. So you'll see these teams often play very ridiculous non-conference schedules, traveling across the country to play many teams like Gonzaga. They play many other high-profile programs. And these schools like Gonzaga, they pay these teams to fly out, to visit their school, to play against them. It's called a buy game. You're kind of buying a victory in some ways, is the way that it's kind of defined. Of course, these teams are certainly capable of winning these games. I don't want to imply that they are not trying to win or anything like that. That's just kind of the nature of how this works. It works this way in football as well, though, of course, there's a lot less games that have to be done this way. But for Gonzaga, yeah, I think in some ways it'd be nice to see them play, Idaho, Montana State, some of those teams, as opposed to playing teams that are not located around here at all. But at the same time, they're helping these schools out. These schools need the money. It's a good opportunity for Gonzaga to play some teams where they can maybe experiment with a few different things and lineups and whatnot, and a good opportunity for these players to not only for the school to not only make money, but also for these players to get a chance to play against high level competition, go to schools, go to areas they may not go otherwise. So I don't really think it's a bad thing. I know some people don't really love this part of Gonzaga scheduling, but they're far from the only team who does it, and I think it's a cool opportunity for all parties involved. Let's talk about the Golden Lions. They are not good. We're going to be perfectly honest here. They are 4-5 on the season. 3 of those 4 wins have come against non-Division I opponents. The only Division I team they have beat this year is Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas is 1-9 on the season. They are 343rd at KenPom right now. That is actually 2 spots higher than Arkansas Pine Bluff, who's 345th at KenPom. Again, they're 362 Division I teams, so they are one of the 20 worst Division I teams in the country, according to KenPom as of this recording. Their losses are to Mizzou, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Ball State, and Incarnate Word. Again, on the road at Minnesota, on the road at Minnesota, Oklahoma, and Mizzou. They're traveling out to play these SEC teams, Big 10 team, Big 12 team, kind of covering a lot of the Power 5 conferences here and going out there to play these teams at their home arena and take L's as they have in these games. The Ball State game was their closest game they've played so far, and that was an 18-point loss. So again, 1 Division I win, 5 Division I losses. None of them were within 18 points. 345th at KenPom, like we said. Offensively, they're 256th, which is by no means great, but it is much higher than their actual overall KenPom rating, in part because their defense is 361st. As a reminder, I said it 2 minutes ago, there are 362 Division I teams in college basketball, meaning the Golden Lions are the second worst defensive team in the entire country, according to that metric. They also, tempo-wise, are 16th. So we're talking about a team that doesn't defend well and gets out in transition and runs and goes and tries to score in the first 5-10 seconds of the shot clock. That could lead to a monster game offensively for Gonzaga. Tons of possessions against a team that doesn't defend it all that well. We'll get into that a little bit more with our keys to the game, but Kylan Milton is the player to watch here. 21.2 points per game, 4 boards, 2.7 assists. He shoot about 44% from 3. This team does have 4 guys averaging over 10 points per game. Nobody else is more than 5.5 points per game. They are shooting about 38.5% from 3, but they also average about 13 turnovers per game, and they only have 1 player above 6'7". Let's get into our 5 keys here quickly. And again, keys when it's a closer game, we talk more just things I'll be watching for in games like this. So here are the things I'm looking for, hoping for, wanting to see in this contest on Tuesday evening. Let's drop 110 points, huh? Why not? Why not get well up over that 100 mark, 110, 120? Again, high octane offense or high tempo offense, I should say, for Ark-Pine Bluff. Of course, Gonzaga likes to run and get out in tempo too. They have a huge size advantage in the paint. There's no reason Gonzaga shouldn't score comfortably over 100 points in this one. Number 2, this was a key against Bakersfield that did not happen, but let's see some Luka Krajnovic. I don't know if Luka was more sick than others for that Bakersfield game. Basically, everybody was sick. There was a big flu bug or some kind of bug that went around in the Maui Invitational. We saw Mark Few was sick after the game. Ben Gregg was sick during the game. Maybe Luka was sick. Maybe that's part of the reason he didn't play much. Gonzaga also never really built a big lead against Bakersfield, but this is a great opportunity for us to see plenty of Luka Krajnovic. More importantly, while it's important to get Luka minutes, it's also important to give Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman and Dusty Stromer a break. 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes from Luka Krajnovic potentially means 28 minutes for Ryan Nembhard, 25, 28 minutes for Nolan Hickman, under 30 minutes for Dusty Stromer. Make sure those guys get a little bit of a breather. Gonzaga has a decent gap before their game against Washington on Saturday, but still good for Luka to get those minutes, to get that exposure, that experience. You don't get better playing Division I college basketball. You can only get so much better behind the scenes. The best way to get better is to actually play. So for him to get that opportunity, I think is important for the Zags, for Luka, and for those starters to get some breaks. This one was also a key for last week. We're going to kind of recycle it here. A big breakout game for Jun-Suk Yeo. Let's see him play some big minutes and do some big things. We saw some good and bad from him in that game against Cal State Bakersfield last week. We only saw, I think, 1 minute from him against USC. Basically came in at the end of the first half to prevent anybody from picking up a foul. But yeah, I'd like to see Yo get more run. We see the glimpses of greatness from him, block shots, getting out in transition, scoring that way, his length, his strength, all that stuff. We also see missing assignments on defense, taking shots he shouldn't be taking. And I'm not trying to knock him or anything like that. It's just, it comes with experience. Getting that experience, getting those opportunities against a team like this and a game like this is valuable for him in the long term, and frankly is valuable for Gonzaga in the short term, because they're going to need June later this season. They're going to need to rely on him, and again, giving those starters a bit of a break. Next up, I'm curious how much we'll see the 3 big lineups. This isn't really a game where they quote unquote need to play the 3 big lineups, but it's an opportunity to do it while, again, giving breaks to guys. They could play a 3 big lineup with Dusty off the floor getting a break, or he could slide down to the 2, and either Hickman or Nembhard could take a break while the other plays point guard. I don't think that the three big lineup is going to be a huge part of the season going forward. However, it is going to be a part of the season going forward. I don't think we're going to see huge swaths of it, entire halves with three bigs, anything like that. But 4 to 6 to 8 minute spurts throughout even big games, yeah. So why not work on it in a game where you can do that? Again, one guy over 6'7" for Ark-Pine Bluff. You got three bigs on the floor. You have a huge size advantage. And there's just, I don't know how Ark-Pine Bluff would be able to defend Gonzaga if they were running these lineups. I don't want to see it for the entire game necessarily, but seeing those opportunities, figuring out what it looks like offensively, flow-wise, how it works defensively. This is the kind of game where you can experiment with that and kind of learn some of those things so that you can more accurately implement it later in the season when you need to against perhaps UConn or perhaps San Diego State or even Kentucky or certain conference games as well. And then finally, another key from last week that didn't end up coming to fruition, walk-on minutes. Will we see Pavel Stosic, who has not played except for that Eastern Oregon game? I think he might be redshirting, but this would be an opportunity where he could get some run if the team is not choosing to redshirt him. We could see Joe Few in this one. We should see Colby Brooks in this one, hopefully. Again, it kind of goes back to the main key, which is more rest for the starters. Any Joe Few minutes, any Colby Brooks minutes are minutes that Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman hopefully are not on the floor, and that's good for this team in the long run. Well, the Zags are back in the top 10. Number 7 in the country right now, according to the AP poll. What does it mean for Mark Few's team? What does it mean for their upcoming opponents? Where did they land in the AP poll? We're going to talk about all that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, Gonzaga versus Washington is on Saturday, and that should be an epic Pac-12 WCC matchup there at Alaska Airlines Arena. And if you're trying to find tickets, you're like, oh man, I'm going to be in Seattle that weekend. I got a chance to go see the Zags, which is not an easy thing to do when you're in Spokane. I cannot recommend using Game Time enough because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sporting events, music, comedy shows, theater events, all that stuff near you. They have killer last minute deals, all in prices. They have a view from your seat feature, and they have the best price guarantee. All that means Game Time has taken the guesswork out of buying tickets. So you don't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next big event. And thankfully, Game Time, they just have you covered. They have the right deals. They have the deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even up to an hour after it starts if you're really last minute wanting to get to some kind of event. It's the best place to find last minute seats. Takes the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, moving on here to talk about the AP poll, where the Gonzaga Bulldogs finally, they've been just outside the top 10 all year long, hanging on to that number 11 spot. But after a massacre of top 10 teams last week, coupled with Gonzaga's very comfortable win over USC. USC was unranked, but that was still a very quality win for the Zags. All of that has led to Gonzaga jumping up 4 spots. They are now the number 7 ranked team in the country, again, according to the AP poll right now. Here is your top 10. Arizona has jumped up to number 1. Tommy Lloyd and the Wildcats having a fantastic season. Take that number 1 spot from Purdue, who, of course, lost on the road at Northwestern. They dropped down to 4. Kansas jumps back up to number 2. They've been in that 2 spot for a while until they lost in the Maui Invitational, dropped down to 5 or 6. Now they're back up at number 2. Houston holds steady at number 3. Purdue is at 4. UConn is at 5. They only dropped 1 spot. Despite that loss to Kansas, it was a loss on the road at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Can't really blame them for not dropping too far. Baylor's number 6, Gonzaga 7, Marquette is 8, North Carolina is 9, and the Creighton Blue Jays coming in at number 10. Again, last week, 7 AP ranked teams lost. Purdue lost, UConn lost, Marquette lost to Wisconsin, Duke lost to Georgia Tech, Kentucky lost to Wilmington, Villanova lost, and Mississippi State all lost as well. It was a wild, wild week in college basketball, a bit overshadowed by the equally wild week we saw in college football with the Pac-12 championship, the SEC championship, and of course the decision-making by the College Football Playoff Committee as well. And what we've seen from Gonzaga, a trend has kind of emerged, unfortunately, for some of Gonzaga's high-profile non-conference opponents. to maybe not be up to the level that Gonzaga would have hoped they would be. Looking at the future opponents for Gonzaga, UConn, again, they dropped one spot from 4 to 5. I'm not worried about UConn. UConn lost to Kansas. The only team that passed them in the AP rankings was Kansas. Makes sense. You're not going to stay ahead of a team that beat you in a head-to-head matchup. But UConn lost at Fog Allen Fieldhouse to Kansas, who had to shoot over 60% from three to barely beat a UConn team that was dealing with injuries. That game did not make me feel like Kansas is significantly better than UConn. Frankly, I'm not sure that game made me feel like Kansas is better than UConn. They won. They deserve it. They are a higher spot. But head-to-head, you put these teams against each other 10 times, 5 at UConn, 5 at Kansas with healthy rosters. If it's not 5-5, I think it might lean UConn. That's a really, really good team for the Huskies. Big storyline for them. Are they going to get fully healthy? Is Stephon Castle going to be 100%? Cam Spencer was dealing with an ankle injury. Donovan Clingan had a bit of a thumb injury. Are those guys all going to be 100% this week? They got North Carolina coming up on Tuesday or tonight as we're recording this. Will they be healthy? Will they be healthy when they play Gonzaga on the 15th in the battle in Seattle? That's a huge storyline to keep an eye on. Meanwhile, Kentucky drops 4 spots to number 16. They were number 12 down to 16 after a home loss to UNC Wilmington. Wilmington had never won a game on the road against a ranked team ever. For Kentucky to lose at Rupp Arena to this Wilmington team, look, they're a freshman team and they make mistakes. They were missing point guard DJ Wagner. They have a phenomenal group of guards, but those guards came in, Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham, combined for 9 assists, but they also combined for 7 turnovers. This team was leading the country in assist to turnover ratio before this game. They had 14 assists and 13 turnovers. The other shoe just dropped. That's what happened here. Meanwhile, Kentucky did return Aaron Bradshaw, 7-foot center, making his college debut, top 5 prospect in the class of 2023. He only played 13 minutes because it was his first game coming off of an injury, but he's going to be back for them against Gonzaga in February. Ugana and Yonso, who has been out for the entire season with an injury, he's probably going to be back for that game as well. So they'll have 2 7-footers in the mix. I think this team's going to be really good in February and a tremendous test for the Zags, even if they're at 16 right now. I wouldn't be surprised, frankly, if that game in February is a battle between 2 top 10 teams. And shout out San Diego State, the Aztecs back in the top 25 at number 25. The reason being they only have 1 loss, and it's a road loss to BYU, and BYU is now number 14 in the country. They're 7-0 on the season. A little hand wave at BYU for being this good the year after they leave the WCC. We're not surprised. We're rolling our eyes. Whatever, BYU, thanks for nothing, I guess, until you leave the conference. But San Diego State does end up climbing back into that top 25. They do deserve it, but man, they came really close to not deserving it. They had to go to overtime to beat Cal, one of the worst Power 6 teams in the entire country. They also needed a game-winning shot to beat UC San Diego in the WAC. That is not a team that you need to be hitting game winners against very often. San Diego State could easily have 3 losses, and they could have 2 real bad ones. They don't, so they hang on to that top 25 spot, but they got Grand Canyon on the road tonight. That's going to be a really tough matchup for San Diego State. They should win. They should be favored to win, but Grand Canyon's a raucous environment, and if Grand Canyon wins this one, San Diego State's brief stay in the top 25 will be over soon. UCLA is receiving votes. Notably, USC did not receive any votes, despite, it's no shame losing to Gonzaga, but they now have 3 losses on the season, losses to Irvine, Oklahoma, now Gonzaga. So USC not in the top 25 conversation. UCLA did get some votes. I think UCLA will be ranked in the not too distant future. Mick Cronin's a good coach. This team is a lot of freshmen, a lot of international freshmen who are still adjusting to college basketball. Ade Mara, I think is fantastic. Burke B, I think is fantastic. Jan Vide, like when these guys find their roles, find their spots, I think this UCLA team is going to be cooking by the time we get into January, February. I think that's a win that's going to age well. I'd like to think USC will age well, maybe when they get Bronny James back, or I guess when they get Bronny James, as Vincent Iwuchukwu finds his footing after missing a huge chunk of last year. Like I believe in this team, this USC team. I don't think they're great. I think they're a borderline top 25 team, but it'd be nice for Gonzaga if both those teams end up in that ranked conversation at some point during the season. We're going to close out today's show discussing the Lady Zags, who are finally ranked, after a huge, massive, monstrous win over Stanford at home. All that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You all want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best and most qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's super easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn, and then you just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. From there, simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates who have just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking about Lisa Fortier and the Gonzaga women's basketball program, who are now ranked number 23 in the country at the AP poll. They are 8-2 on the season, but the story for this team is the win on Sunday at the McCarthy Athletic Center against the Stanford Cardinal. Gonzaga and Stanford have been playing each other every year for many years now, close to a decade, I believe. It's been a home-and-home series alternating. Stanford comes into the McCarthy Athletic Center, takes the worst loss that this program has had in about 4 years. They got beat by 18 points by Gonzaga, 96-78. The Zags nearly hung 100 on the Stanford Cardinal in this game. What an incredible performance. The Zags now have a 24-game home winning streak. Incredible performance for them at the McCarthy Athletic Center. They are killers when they are in the kennel. Britta Maxwell, 27 points in this one. She shot 10 of 16 from the field. She was 4 of 8 from 3. Not to be outdone. Vonnie Ejim, 27 points as well. Also tacked on 12 boards for a double-double, 2 assists. She shot 11 of 16 from the field. The Lady Zags, 53.5% in totality from the field, 41.7% from 3. That is 10 of 24 from beyond the arc. They took 10 free throws. They knocked every single one of them down. 50+%, 40+%, 100% from the free throw line. That's going to get you a lot of W's night in and night out. Yes, the Lady Zags got a bit of a fortuitous situation with Cameron Brink, the star player for Stanford. She had 10 points and 6 rebounds in just 11 minutes, but she was out of the game due to injury. Does that erase an 18-point game? I don't think so. I don't think that people can say, well, Stanford would have won if Cameron Brink played. To be clear, Cameron Brink is extraordinarily talented, and losing your star player to an injury can have a deflating effect on your program. But that shouldn't take away anything from what this Zags team did. They hung 96 on Stanford, an incredible, jaw-dropping, fantastic performance from Lisa Fortier's team, and they finally got rewarded with their spot in the AP Top 25. 23, I think you could maybe argue they deserve to be a little bit higher. They're only one spot ahead of a 3-loss North Carolina team. I don't know if I love that, but their only 2 losses on the season are to teams who are ranked 18th in Louisville, who jumped 4 spots up to 18, and number 21, Washington State, who has stayed steady at 21. So 2 losses are to ranked teams that are ranked higher than them. Not surprising that you would be behind teams that are ranked higher than you. I'm just happy to see this team finally in the top 25. They have really earned it in a significant way. And they needed to play a tough non-conference schedule, and they needed to win key games in that non-conference schedule. Stanford is far, far, far and away the best win that this team has, but they also have a win over an Alabama team that has been ranked at times this year and has been receiving votes. They have a road win over Montana, wins over Toledo, North Florida, Wyoming, Liberty, and Eastern Washington. This is a team they've played good quality programs. They've beat good quality programs. They beat an elite program. Stanford was ranked 3rd when they beat that team. So this is a team that has proven definitively they are one of the 25 best teams in the country. And they're doing it, riding those starters really hard. The bench has stepped up in a way. We've seen some more contributions from Callie Stokes, from Esther Little. They're bringing some stuff off the bench, but for the most part, this team has been reliant real heavily on Vonnie Ejim, who's now averaging 20 points, 8.5 boards, and shooting about 67% from the field. Britta Maxwell and Kaylee Trung are both averaging around 13.5 points per game. Kaylin Trung's just behind them, 12.5 points. Eliza Hollingsworth is at 10.5 points. All 5 starters in double figures, all of them shooting well from beyond the arc. This is a dangerous, deep, experienced, talented team, and they're showing every bit of that. And they still got some good games left on their schedule. They have played the meat of their non-conference with those games against Louisville, Washington State, Alabama, and Stanford. But they got 2 road games coming up at Cal on the 7th of December, and then at Rice 2 days later. Both decent quality programs for them to get a chance to play. Michaela Williams, former Gonzaga player, is playing at Cal this year, so that'll be a bit of a reunion of sorts there. And now, right now, according to the AP poll, the Lady Zags don't have any more ranked opponents on their schedule, but again, still opportunities to pick up good games. They got Cal, they got Rice, they also got South Dakota State, they got Arizona as well, so plenty of good opportunities, and they're going to need them because the WCC is pretty weak this year. And we saw this last year where Gonzaga's team did not get a very favorable seed because of their net ranking. Their net ranking was low because the WCC just didn't help them at all. Now BYU's out the door. That weakens the WCC even more. BYU, was a powerhouse in the WCC in women's basketball. So they're going to need to do it. And so far, so good, because the first net rankings came out on Monday, and the Lady Zags were 17. 1 spot ahead of Louisville, by the way, who they beat, who came in at number 18. So Lady Zags are a top 25 team in the AP poll. They're a top 20 team in the net rankings. They got plenty more good opportunities to help build that net rankings with some more wins against teams like Cal and Arizona and Rice and whatnot. And again, they're going to need it because once they get in the WCC, they're not going to have a lot of quad 1, quad 2 opportunities. But if they keep taking care of business, this is a team that should not only remain in the AP top 25, but by the time March Madness rolls around, this is a team that could very realistically get a top 5, maybe even a top 4 seed in the big dance. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Shout out to those everyday listeners. Shout out to those of you on the Discord as well. Definitely join if you have not done so yet. There's a link in the show notes. Free to join. Talking hoops 24/7 there. We got channels for the WCC, channels for women's basketball, channel for game threads for each individual game as well, all on that Discord channel. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday with a recap of the Ark-Pine Bluff game and a look around the WCC. Until next time, as always, go Zags.